What's up, Penn State fans? It's BWI Live Wednesday, November 12th. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Penn State, Michigan State meet this Saturday in East Lansing. Both teams looking for their first win since T. Frank changed the intro music and set up for the BWI Live show here on YouTube. So the Nittany Lions and the Spartans both looking to overcome T. Frank. That I'm not going to call it a lapse in judgment because it was a good change, but maybe Penn State fans are blaming you for this situation. No, I'm just messing with you. But good morning, good to be with everyone. Yes, I'm sure you have.
That's not the first time I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for everyone who's joining us here this morning. We have some news and notes to get you started. We're going to get into a closer look at this Penn State-Michigan State game. A game I was writing my prediction this morning for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and, you know, it's just... I almost couldn't believe what I was writing, T. Frank. Like, you know, you think back to where we thought Penn State would be at this point, and, you know, I don't know if I am firmly on the record as not being a believer in trap games, but certainly if you looked at this game back in August, you said to yourself, okay, Penn State can exhale at the end of this Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana stretch, but, you know, will it be ready to go on the road and take on Michigan State and not suffer the, you know, proverbial slow start or whatever you want to call it? And now the question becomes, which one of these teams is more motivated to end their 6-game losing streak? We heard Jonathan Smith talk about it at his weekly news conference, Terry Smith as well. Like, these guys want to taste what winning feels like again, I believe is the way Terry Smith put it. And who cares, you know, who plays well enough to get to taste that is what we will decide this game this week.
I've been talking about this. I don't know how to talk about these games because it's been, I don't even know how long it's been since Penn State's been in a situation where these games don't matter. Because even in like 2021, they were fighting for like, were they going to go to a New Year's Six Bowl?
Right.
Like, what was their, you know, like I'm struggling even to remember like what were the conversations at that point. Like, obviously they were not going to be going for their national championship run that they wanted in that situation, but it was also there were still things to play for in terms of the end of the season. And this, like, there's a certain amount of fans, I feel like, that have just given up. Like, they don't care about this part of the season. And it's interesting to try and understand where the team's perspective is. Because, as you mentioned, it would be human nature to, after those 3 games, like, you're trying to try, but there's just there's only so many times you can get up off the mat when you've been devastated the way they have in terms of losing 2 of those 3 games by a point and or by 4 points and the way that they lost to Indiana, all these games. That's why heading into this week, I said from Saturday to Monday, or Sunday to Monday, those are going to be the most important 48 hours for this team to get over what happened to them and continue to get back into the process of trying to win again, because these are all very winnable games for Penn State here.
Yeah, they most certainly are, T. Frank, and it starts with perhaps the most winnable game left on the schedule for the Nittany Lions. BetMGM makes them a 7-point favorite at 50.5 is the point total. We'll get into that and more about the game a little bit later in Best Bets. But let's start with some news and notes on this Wednesday, November 12th edition of BWI Live. Tuesday night, Penn State lost 2 more commitments in the second half, in its class of 2026. Jack Fuchs flipped to Northwestern, and Isaac you're going to have to help me out here, T. Frank. Thank you.
Chukura.
Yes, Chukura. Thank you. Flips to Miami. So Penn State down 2 more class of 2026 recruits. We'll let Ryan and Sean get into the nitty-gritty of that with you on Thursday's recruiting show. But, like, to me, T. Frank, the initial reaction is I don't want to say a shrug, because that's not fair to the process and what recruiting means to college football and things like that. But at the same time, I think we all realize that signing day is, 3 weeks away, give or take? And these guys have to make sure that they have a seat somewhere until Penn State figures out what the next step is. Again, some guys will end up from this 2026 class that are currently in it at Penn State. I feel pretty good about that. But, you know, if you feel any kind of way about uncertainty about whether you'll have a spot with the new coaching staff at Penn State, you have to go make sure you have a spot somewhere else. And that's easier said than done this close to signing day.
I think to me the one that's interesting is Chukura, because he is and was very scheme specific to Penn State in terms of they like those athletic defensive tackles, don't have to be the biggest guys in the world, and maybe the next guy wants, you know, real bona fide run stuffers. And Chukaro was never going to be that guy. He was going to be an athletic, penetrating, three technique in the same mold that they have, the guys on the roster, Ty Blanding, Zane Durant, even a little bit of a Xavier Gilliam, although he's a bigger guy, started as a defensive end, in high school. So two things. First off, he's very talented, and going to Miami, I think, is indicative of his talent level. Going to a team that is, kind of on a similar plane as Penn State in terms of recruiting and production on the football field historically. And then to me, Fuchs going to Northwestern, that makes a little more sense to me. Instead of, going up in a school designation, he is very much a project player. So he's got tons of size, tons of physical potential from, the raw frame and his background with his dad, I think, being an offensive line coach. But from the athletic standpoint, like, Northwestern makes a lot of sense to me.
It does, yeah. There's no doubt about it. Just to answer a news note from Monday in the chat, I don't know if you guys talked about it on Tuesday's show or not, but Michigan State not committing to a starting quarterback going into this week, which if you're Jonathan Smith, why would you let Penn State prepare for both Chillis and his name escapes me at the moment, but the backup that they started against Minnesota. Just let Penn State prepare for both of those guys. So cannot blame Jonathan Smith for doing that. I'm going to guess it's the other guy who starts, T. Frank, but it's
Alessio Milojevic.
Yes,
that's
thank
a fun
you.
one.
Yeah, I apologize. I've given you the two tough name pronunciation assignments so far this morning. We're only about 10 minutes into the show. But I would guess they go with him, and we do see a bit of Chillis. Chillis can run. And I guess that's one thing Michigan State will have to think about is the ability and success opposing teams have had so far this year, taking advantage of Penn State's defense from a running quarterback perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's an absolute element they're going to want in this game, because that is one thing that they have that Penn State can't defend. I think Penn State can reasonably defend their passing attack, and so you need to have that dynamic kind of 1-2 punch or third element to the game, because we'll get into it a little bit later about Michigan State, but their run game's okay, and they need something to help their offensive line. And I thought going into this, like going into my film study, I thought Chillis got hurt when I was first watching them, because they abuse him. Like, they just use that cheat code whenever they can.
Yes, that's exactly right. So interesting to see what Michigan State will decide to do there. Obviously, Penn State recruiting in the 2026 class will get interesting in a couple of weeks, but at least for now, unfortunately, more bad news for Penn State. On the good news front of things, men's basketball team beat Navy last night, a game where the Nittany Lions could never quite put the midshipmen away for good, and yet anytime Navy got within a couple of possessions, Penn State would grow its lead and ultimately wins that game by right around double digits. So good win for them. And then the last one I have for you, T. Frank, Nebraska-Penn State is next Saturday at Beaver Stadium, senior day for Penn State in State College, and we don't know what time the game will start yet, and we will not find that out until after Saturday's slate of games, because the Big Ten has elected to, or its television partners, I should say, has elected to put that game on the 6-day hold window. So we'll find out late Saturday night or early Sunday morning what time the clash 2 Saturdays now with Nebraska starts for Penn State.
Yeah, the Matt Rule Bowl, I think it should be a big noon or a primetime game just for that alone. If it's going to decide if Matt Rule is the next head coach at Penn State, right? Like, that's where we started a month ago. If he's going to come to Penn State and he's going to win that game and cement his position as the next head coach. I don't know. That's one of those games on the schedule. We talk about winnable games, and Nebraska is a pretty good team this year. Obviously, they lost their quarterback, and that's a problem. But they're a wild card in this conversation of could be interesting. That could be a game, like, I know we're talking about a lot of apathy here at the end of the season, but that could be an interesting game. Like, people might be more curious about that than we think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that from what I saw last week, T. Frank, with the backup quarterback Latif for Nebraska, that game is not going to be the I thought as soon as Raiola got hurt, like, it would be an easier game for Penn State, and it may be a little bit easier, but I don't think it's going to be. Yeah, he certainly can, and that's one of the reasons why. But I don't think it's going to be if you're ranking the last 3 games in terms of winnability, Michigan State is number 1 without question. And I thought when Raiola got hurt, that locked Nebraska in the number 2 and then Rutgers number 3, but I think it's more of a toss-up between those last two now.
Yeah, and Rutgers, they're an interesting one this year where their offense can sling it a little bit and their defense can't stop anybody in the air. And
right.
So I don't know how I was more in tune with what Rutgers was doing at the beginning of the season because they were playing a lot of Penn State's future opponents. Haven't checked in on them in a little bit, but Ethan Kaliak-Manis didn't look like the Carson Wentz great value, you got it on a website from China sort of look of a quarterback. He actually looked pretty good at the beginning of the year. And like I don't know what their record is. I know that they're not relevant, but I don't know what their record is at this point.
Right. Well, I would say that game probably comes down to which one of those teams, or if both, are still in the mix for bowl game eligibility. Perhaps that is what will be the deciding factor in who's motivated more or less for that game. If you want to go to Penn State Rutgers, if you want to go to Nebraska at Penn State, the current get-in price on Game Time, by the way, for Nebraska Penn State is a crisp $11. So if you want to go to Senior Day, a lot of seniors back in this Beaver Stadium, obviously, for the last time in a couple weekends. If you want to go to Penn State, Michigan State, you can get in right now for $28. And why did I start the Game Time promo now? That's because they sent me a reminder that Eagles tickets are dropping for this weekend's game with Detroit. One of the things I love the most, T. Frank, is that they tell you, hey, hello, listen here, it's dropping. These tickets are going down in price. You better jump on them now if you want to. They have zone pricing. They have all-in pricing, so you know exactly what you're going to pay. So if you want to go see Penn State wrestling, Penn State basketball, Penn State football, you want to sit behind the Nittany Lions bench in any of those sports, you can do that by looking at the fees. With the prices where all the fees are included. You heard that right. You won't be surprised at checkout, and you can use promo code ON3, that's ON3, at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. I love the Game Time app, love seeing the views from my seat and the all-in pricing feature. So take the guesswork out of buying college football or college athletics tickets in general with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code ON3, ON3, for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Thank them for being a part of the show here with us. And now we're going to move into, go ahead.
I was going to say, it would have been a perfect weekend for you if you could go to the game and then go see Detroit and the Eagles play, but they're in Philly. I don't think you're going to be able to make that trip, but if they were playing in Detroit, like that would have been perfect. You just stay there, watch the game, and come back Monday.
Yeah, I at one point thought that game was in Detroit, and that had briefly crossed my mind, and I looked at the schedule and thought, well, there goes that idea. It was a nice thought at least, but all right, let's get into our regular Wednesday feature. It's the practice preview for Penn State tonight. And the Nittany Lions, of course, will be back on the practice field this evening. Interim head coach Terry Smith and his staff will have the group. I don't know. What's the weather like up there, T. Frank? Probably indoors tonight, I would guess.
Yeah, I think so. It's been a little bit wet today, 40s and raining. I think if it were dry, they'd be outside. The weather, it doesn't seem to be like that the temperature is the problem, but it snowed yesterday, rained today. I think they're going to want to be inside just to make sure nobody slips and gets hurt or anything like that.
Right, so very likely to see what's going on inside of Holuba Hall tonight. The last couple weeks have been interesting for you guys in terms of getting to see the offense and maybe then not see the offense, or guys being out, some inside Holuba Hall and some out working in Lash. So what are you looking for tonight, T. Frank? What is on your mind as Penn State gets ready to get on a plane later this week to go to Michigan State? But first, they will obviously be back on the practice field tonight.
Yeah, so the right side of the offensive line continues to be an enigma, and the way Terry Smith answered the question about TJ Shanahan and Nolan Rucci and how they were rotating guys left, I think a good bit of mystery is there as well. He said TJ Shanahan was banged up, so they went with their original lineup, and so if he's healthy, is he the starting guard? How is that working out? Like, there's obviously depth there that they don't mind playing Nolan Rucci, but they have was he banged up? Like, was there a reason they moved on? He talked about not having different options and playing different players before. Didn't mention an injury before. Now he mentions this, so it's like they just can't seem to be consistent in their lineup over there, on the right side of the offensive line, and that's partly, Greg, again, you called it, when you don't have 5 starters. Or when you have 7 starters, you don't have 5, because they still have not been able to nail down a consistent right guard, right tackle combination. And so I'm curious of what it looks like today, because before the game against Ohio State, Nolan Ritchie wasn't with the starters. This past week, he was. And so now what do we see this week? And that's, never a 100% indicator, but it is a tendency lean when we see guys starting or going with the first team unit during practice on the offensive line, because they don't have as much time as you might think to just do 10 minutes of nothing in front of us. They do have to show certain things, and on the offensive line, it's one that I'm interested in. Although if we're in Haluba Hall tonight, it's going to be on the opposite side of Haluba Hall, and it's always hard to see. So we'll find out. Also, we have a truncated viewing of practice tonight, so even less than we're used to.
Oh, T. Frank, I'm sure you'll be able to learn some things, but certainly, unfortunately, not as much as you would like to. But yeah, I think that, at this point, that offensive line situation just sort of for better or for worse. Penn State, like you said, has just struggled to stay healthy. Some time. Nolan Ritchie's been in and out. TJ Shanahan, to your point, did not play last week. So it's been a disappointing year for that group based on the expectations at the start of the season. And, it's not the only group that falls into that category. On the other side of the ball, I'm sure that Fitz will be looking for Chaz Coleman. Terry Smith hoping that he'll be back this week after not playing last week. So we'll have to wait and see how that works out. But, yeah, I would say offensive line configuration, Chaz Coleman's availability, probably the two most notable things to look for. And then from there, I think it'll just come down to, are there any freshmen now in their own numbers with 3 games to go, and Penn State in a position to have some more flexibility with how it's going to handle those guys moving forward?
Yeah, and that's always hard to tell, too, because, you've got overlap of numbers on the other side. Now, it's a little bit easier when you know the starters. And at the same time, if Matt Otten arrives in his number 6, that's also Nick Marsh. The thing that I guess I'd look at a couple of positions, RB2 and RB3. They have been, it felt like the closest at times to being on the field, and we've never seen them just because of the frustrations, I think, with Nick Singleton's performance early in the season. But now, he's playing better, I don't think we're going to see them. And then I guess what other position would there be? I'm thinking especially on the offensive side of the ball, where would you see more young guys play where there's an opportunity? And then the defensive side of the ball, I also don't think that there's anybody who's ready to play. Defensive tackle is out. The defensive ends are already playing that are going to be playing. Linebacker, we've seen Alex Tash. And then it would be Jameer Joseph in the secondary, a couple of young guys in the secondary. So it's just, yes, there's talent out there, but it is interesting while we're here now at this point in the season. And even then, I think they're not going to blow out Michigan State, so we're not going to see a bunch of freshmen. Right. It's been a weird season. The other thing I'm interested in, and the last thing I want to kind of highlight here is the last 3 weeks, we've seen some sort of, and for lack of a better term, shenanigans from the Penn State offense, because they've been trying to install new stuff, and they've been trying to work on things that they want to work on without tipping their hand and showing it in front of the media, and we're not smart enough to know what not to film, so they have to go inside Haluba Hall and work on it when we're outside, or they're trying to, find a way to obscure it from our cameras when they are inside. Is there more of that this week, or are they now in a position where we had the time to install what we're going to install? That's over. Now we just got to work on stuff, and that's the part where I think that's what I'm interested in, because there's going to be, again, there's less time than you think for them to work each week on what to work on. They've got to work on some stuff in front of us. So are they still installing new things, or are they working on stuff that they want to get better at? That's where that's the thing I'm most interested in, that unfortunately, when it comes to hey, we'll talk about it on Thursday, I don't think that's appropriate to talk about. So we'll just talk about it afterwards, in the post-game show or whenever, because those are the things to me that matter, of what are they installing? What are they working on? And then how does that show up on Saturday? Because they did, this past week, they did show up in a couple of big moments on Saturday, whether they worked or not, led to the end of the game being the way it did.
Yeah, so maybe Penn State will try some new things this week. Maybe they will throw the ball down the field and call those plays for a full 60 minutes instead of just the second half. We'll have to wait and see. But some of that will be available to us at practice tonight. Some of it will not. Certainly check out BWIillustrated.com for the latest on that. And from interim head coach Terry Smith, it's $1 for the first week of access over at BWIillustrated.com. Don't forget, hit the video here with a like, and also subscribe to the channel so you get things like interim head coach Terry Smith's weekly and post-game news conferences, interviews with Penn State wrestling coach Cale Sanderson, basketball content as well. Check us all out here on the BWI YouTube channel at the end of today's show, and also over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Yeah, I blew through the Penn State wrestling news and notes portion of the show to start up in the top rundown. But yeah, Penn State wrestling starts this weekend, so I think we'll probably have a wrestling show this week, T. Frank, and obviously plenty of preview coverage over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com as the Nittany Lions get ready for their latest NCAA wrestling title defense. So are we ready for best bets, my friend? Do you have any final thoughts on practice?
Nope, I'm ready to go. What do you got this week?
All right, let's do it. Alrighty, T. Frank, this segment of the BWI Live Show is brought to you by BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and you will get a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3, that is capital O, capital N, number 3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. So, best bets here, T. Frank, for the week. I'm going to start in the SEC. The one that just jumped off the board while I was scrolling through the BetMGM odds page this morning was the under in LSU and Arkansas. It's currently sitting at 56.5. I think this game's probably played in the mid 40s to like right around 50 at most. So I'm getting almost a touchdown more than where I think this game will end up. So the under 56.5 Arkansas LSU jumped out to me. Moving back to Penn State, Michigan State, as we sit here and talk about it this morning, I'm just going to look down quick and make sure I have the right numbers here. Penn State is a 7.5-point road favorite. Total currently 49.5 points. So we're going to start, I guess, with the total, with the spread. 7.5 points, Penn State road favorite. I'm struggling with this one big time because I think that we talked about it off the air. If Penn State shows up and plays the way it did for the majority of the Indiana game, and certainly like it did on offense for the second half of the Indiana game, they should win this game going away. And if they can convert, like Michigan State is among the worst offensive line in the country when it comes to allowing sacks.
Yep.
And so, like, there's a lot of things after 3 weeks of not really liking the way Penn State matched up with its opponents for whatever reason. Like, there's a lot of matchups to love for Penn State and its players and its fans against this Michigan State team. You just wonder how much the last 3 weeks have sucked out of these guys in terms of going to Iowa, losing a close one, going to Ohio State, losing, and then losing having victory ripped out of your hands at home against Indiana last week. So that is where the calls for pause is. So when I look at this one, T. Frank, I'm going to go with the total. It's 49.5, and I have the under there. I don't see Michigan State scoring a lot of points. Like, I have a hard time seeing them going beyond 14. Penn State could get into the 30s if I'm right about that and still have this game go under. So I'm going to go with the under 49.5. I don't think there's going to be a ton of points scored in this game. And, if there is, it's because Penn State's defense reverted back to its old self when it comes to handling deep passes and also stopping and running quarterbacks. But I like this game to be very slow. Like, I'm expecting plenty of ground and pound from Penn State, T. Frank. I just see a lot of either long possessions or at least clock-killing possessions in our future Saturday when watching Penn State, Michigan State.
Yeah, and there's the I guess the variability here is the quarterback because we have a very limited sample size of Milojevic, but he did pretty well under pressure. Penn State and Terry Smith made it very clear that they want to get pressure on the quarterback. So that was kind of the glitch for Childs early in the season. He has 38% completion percentage when under pressure and was blitzed about 40% of the time. So you've got a good chance of getting home when you do that because of the offensive line, and he was put under so much pressure. They have, I think, 31 combined sacks this year, which is just rough. That's a lot of sacks. I think that's right. That might be a little bit high. I apologize.
It's 30. It's 30.
30? Okay.
Yeah. So Michigan State comes into this week with 30 allowed sacks this season, and Rutgers is the worst in the Big Ten at 31. So, and then I think the worst in the country is actually Auburn with 39, if memory serves. So, certainly some opportunities for Penn State's pass rush to not only get to the quarterback, but also finish the job in ways they haven't. So Penn State and Michigan State under 49.5. And then the last one I'll go with here, T. Frank, just looking at the first half total, I'm going to take that under 24.5 as well. Like if it's vague at all, I don't see a lot of points coming in this game. So
yeah,
that's what I got this week, buddy. I don't know about you, but I just don't see Penn State getting much more into the 30s. And maybe you're right. Perhaps the Michigan State quarterback difference will show up and lead them to more points than the 20 they scored against Minnesota before the bye week. And having the bye week to get ready for this game does not hurt matters. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm just having a hard time seeing the Spartans scoring a lot. But we'll see. If Penn State does not show up motivated, anything's possible.
That's the biggest, yeah. That's
but
the
then
biggest
Michigan State
variable.
might not either. So,
I find there's a lot of decent on the Michigan State defensive line. Like, they got some decent players, some decent linebackers, and they could make Penn State earn it. And if Penn State's committed to running the ball, that could really clog up the point totals. That's where I think if you're looking for the under, to me, that's the explanation, is Penn State really wants to run the ball, and they have the success they've had for most of the year, which is they've been okay at running the football.
Right. All right. Well, that's this week's best bets from BetMGM.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
Alrighty. Thanks, BetMGM. T. Frank, it is time to continue our conversation and dive further into our preview of Penn State and Michigan State. Nittany Lions, like we just said, are a 7.5-point road favorite. After being an underdog for a few weeks, they are now picked to win a game, and the more likely side, according to the odds board, to end their 6-game losing streak. Michigan State comes into this one, which will start at 3:30 p.m. on CBS. Can only imagine how excited the top crew of CBS's broadcast team is to be in East Lansing for this one. But they will be there, as will we, for BlueWayIllustrated.com. And so I guess let's just start with... you want to start with the Penn State offense against the Michigan State defense, or do you want to do it in reverse?
Yeah, let's do that, because I think that's the most important aspect of this game is how Penn State's offense responds and how they play, because that's going to determine what shows up, right? Like which Andy Kolnicki's calling the plays. And have they finally broken through on this is the game plan we want and this is how we want it to go? If that's the case, like I think that there's a great opportunity here for Ethan Grunkmeyer.
Yeah, there certainly is. And on film, based on what we saw in the second half against Indiana, there will be chances against this Michigan State secondary to have time to throw the ball down the field. And then once Penn State does that, it should open up some running room for either Nick Singleton or Katron Allen. Allen is the Lions' new leader in career rushing attempts and should get plenty of chances to run on Saturday. So, yeah, when I look at the Penn State offense against the Michigan State defense, like you said, there's a lot of decent across this Michigan State starting 11 on defense, but no one that really scares you tremendously. And so to me, T. Frank, I just think that, they give up plenty of passing yards through the air. They rank near the bottom in both completion or yards allowed per completion and also yards allowed per rushing attempt. Not a place you want to be, of course. I'm stating the obvious there, but if you want to envision a world where the Penn State offense maybe has its best game of the year and maybe looks explosive in both the run game and the pass game, there's certainly enough on paper to lead you to believe that this could be the week that happens.
So here's the thing. I think that the fear of Ethan Grunkmeyer, like how they've been using him for at least 6 quarters, right? So Ohio State and then the first half against Indiana. You don't need that in this situation because the main problem was you were afraid he was going to make a mistake. You were afraid he was going to turn the ball over. You can turn the ball over in this game. I'm not saying every play, but there's more margin for error in this game. And the biggest thing is that Michigan State does not have a good pass rush. They don't get edge pressure specifically. They have to blitz to get pressure, and it's not even super effective at that point. So if you're worried about pressure rattling Ethan Grunkmeyer, I thought he did better in this last game against Indiana. They did not give as much of the exotic looks as I was expecting, but at the same time, he was calm and cool for the most part when he was throwing the football in normal situations, not trying to win the game at the very end. So if you want to play your game, this is a game I think you can play the full playbook sort of conversation where we don't have to manage Grunkmeyer in the moment, right? So because to me that's what Andy Kolnicki was managing for, was we need to manage the quarterback in this very big game because we can't make any mistakes, or else if we do, we're not going to win the game. And spoiler alert, he did make some mistakes and they still were leading at the very end of the game. So there is margin for error with this offense. To me, that's the biggest thing, is if you're going to go into this game, you need to let him play the full playbook. I think that's realistic this week. And to kind of dig in into like what this defense is good at, their linebackers, Jordan Hall, and who's the other guy? I'm trying to look here quickly. I apologize. Wayne Matthews III. Yes. Good run defenders. That's the thing, is like they're good. What they're good at is they're good at defending the run. He and then Alex Van Summeren up front, their defensive tackle. They're a decent core of run defenders. So if you're trying to run up the middle, they are going to cause you some problems. But play action off of that is also an opportunity for you to attack downfield. So if you got those guys that want to defend the run, they want to be aggressive in however it is, exchanging gaps, getting into their blocks, attacking the line of scrimmage. This is a game where that can work because that has been their strength, and then they've been weak over the middle and throwing deep against certain players in coverage. And when you don't have a pass rush, you give a quarterback more time to scan the field. Grunkmeyer's been very good about not panicking when he has extra time in the pocket. So I think there's an opportunity here for Penn State to have a full passing attack, have the full game plan ready, if they're willing to call it. And that's, to me, again, the wild card here, as much as like the buy-in from the defense and from the offensive line and from the skill players of, are we playing this game? Like, are we up the same way we were last week?
Right. And so to the point made in the chat, I can't find who said it here at this very second, but somebody predicted that Penn State will have Katron Allen and Nick Singleton go over 100 yards rushing this week. You can't rule it out. Michigan had 200-yard rushers against Michigan State back when they met earlier this year. But to me, if I'm making bold predictions, which we do every Friday over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and then we take yours over on the Lions Den message board, I'm going to predict 2 100-yard receivers for Penn State in this game. I just look at this Michigan State defense. Yeah, I know. I said bold. Bold. We'll see if it happens.
That's beyond bold. That's ballsy.
Yeah. Well, we're at the point of the year, T. Frank, where it just, let's give it a shot and see what happens. But
yeah,
I do think that Penn State can find ample time to pass this week, and they can use some of the things you just talked about with Michigan State's defenders against them, and lead to some open stuff over the middle of the field and some stuff down the field that will help Penn State get to that point of the season where it can have.
Is Grunk going over 300? Is Grunk getting?
He's going to have to be high. Yeah, he's definitely going to have to be high 250s for, or at least somewhere between 275 and 3 at minimum for this to happen. So I'm just kind of making this all up on the fly, but I do believe it, and I will write it later this week. I looked through the box scores for Michigan State, and look, it is conceivable too that Penn State just decides to say, you know what, we have the 2 best players on the field in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. We are just going to run to death and let those guys get in space and see what happens, but. I do think that there's chances to throw the ball down the field here. And if Andy Kotelnicki's and this offense show up like they did in the second half against Indiana, It's possible. If the first half offense shows up, or if the offense from the earlier games, since James Franklin's been fired, shows up, then there's no chance of this, T. Frank. But
Yeah.
I can't fathom going back and watching the tape of that game last week and saying to yourself, you know what? We don't want to be more like we were in the second half moving forward. We just don't want to do that. That's not in our best interest. I can't.
We
fathom
really
that
want to
being
make
the-
it hard on the run
Right.
game. Make it as hard as possible. Yeah.
Right. So, hey, one thing you wrote about, I don't know if you guys got into it yesterday, and if you did, we'll just continue talking about this game. But going back to last week quick, your thoughts on how Penn State ended the game on offense. Not the last drive, but the drive before the last drive.
Yeah, so I didn't talk about it yesterday, but we did address this on the Monday video of the 3 things we learned. That was my biggest disappointment. It wasn't the 2-minute drive for the defense. My biggest disappointment was that they were in that position in the first place, because Fernando Mendoza is a great quarterback, and you put him in that situation, you're asking for what happened. You don't want to give the quarterback that opportunity. And so I went through the final 4-minute drive.
Yep.
And it was either 4 of 6 or 5 of 6, and it's like 4.5 because there was an RPO on one of them that didn't really have any blocking, so I counted that as not an RPO. That they had either an option or an RPO on 4 of those 6 plays, so they were willing to throw the ball if it was there, sort of. But my biggest problem was, and this is kind of a thing I've learned here.
Yeah.
If you are choosing option football, meaning RPOs and read option, either a pass run or a run with 2 different options, there are times when those are useful, and I believe that you can still use those effectively. But if they are what you're using as the bulk of your diet in a big situation like this, and especially in high leverage situations, you are allowing the defense to choose what you do. And I think that's a crippling mistake, because there were big plays. If Penn State were bold enough to call them, just call those plays, there were opportunities there for Penn State just to ice that game. If they just, didn't put the ball in Indiana's hands, because what they did is, when you have the option on a play, you can set up your defense to force the ball and funnel it where you want it to go. So every single time, Indiana funneled the ball by having their defensive ends play wide, or switching the end man on the line of scrimmage after the snap to force the ball inside. So basically, just every single time that you run an option, we're going to not give you the pass signal, and we're not going to give you the keep signal. So everything went to the running backs. Everything went into a 5-man defensive line and a 3-linebacker set. So like 90% of the defense is in the A and B gap, and that's where they funneled the ball there. So Penn State and Ethan Grunkmeyer, I think, was reading the play right, but he was just being forced into that situation. If you do that, you are giving them the advantage.
Yeah.
And so, like, in that situation, call a passing play. If you want to call a passing play, call a passing play. You are still in the same amount of risk, because you had to throw the ball on 3rd and 9 anyway. You had to throw the ball at the end of the game to try and win it anyway. So do it on your terms. Do it when the defense is not set up to stop it. Give Ethan Grunkmeyer. It's the same conversation as, throwing on 1st down. If you're giving your quarterback the unexpected opportunity, you are taking advantage of what the defense is, where they are disadvantaged. Or you're putting him in an obvious passing situation where he's going to have to be exceptional to convert that down. And it just, to me, like, that was the critical mistake of that drive. And honestly, of this offense this year, has been that those options are not nearly as effective. You go through and you look at everything, teams have figured out how to put Penn State in a situation where they can funnel the ball where they want it, especially in passing situations.
Yeah, and that is no way to win college football games in 2025. All right, well, I didn't want to go too much further into that because that was last week. We were on to this week.
But thank you. I had that rant bubbling inside me all week anyway.
Yes. Yeah, I kind of figured. So I read what you wrote on Monday. I was like, yep, we'll get to this today at some point. But all right, so the Penn State offense will need more situations where it's not being dictated to by the defense to win this week. Like we said a couple of times now, statistically speaking, at least on paper, there will be chances for Penn State to do that if it wants to. Flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, T. Frank, what have you learned so far about this Spartans offense and what it could do, or maybe couldn't do, to Penn State this week?
Yeah, you have to start with the quarterback. And this is the part where it's really tough, because is Milojevic, I hope I'm saying his name right. It looks very phonetically like Milojevic, or Vic. He's good. Like I like him. I think he's actually a pretty good quarterback. My concern is that Minnesota might just be bad, and like you're seeing him against one particular team.
Right.
I like Michigan State's receivers. So obviously everyone knows about Nick Marsh, but I think that in the last game they may have found something in their slot receiver they were playing. And I'm just like, by the way, I'm just kind of digging into this stuff, so I don't know everyone's name. I usually don't know anybody's name, but Rodney Bullard, their slot receiver, I think he's pretty fast. He averages 23 yards of reception, so he's kind of a big play guy. He's had 9 targets this year. And then, of course, you got Nick Marsh and Omari Kelly on the outside. So you've got 2 stable receivers, guys that I think are good. And if you add in that speed element and you can get Milojevic away from the pressure, he's a guy that's been making plays. Again, we talked about his completion percentage against pressure. They got guys in his face. He had 3 sacks in that game, and he still completed 71% of his passes against pressure. So it's that, to me, that's the biggest thing of like, in this game, if he's actually that good, then Penn State's going to be in a dogfight because he's going to find open receivers. But at the same time, like Penn State's secondary is their strength. And I know that against Ohio State, they kind of went against that narrative. But since then, like they were pretty good against Indiana. Now, key situations they weren't, but they were able to keep a lid on a very explosive offense for a couple of reasons. But, other than they're better than that Ohio State game showed them. So, to me, the biggest threat here is that Michigan State likes to throw the ball, and if this quarterback can play better against pressure, then I think there's an opportunity for them to move the ball against Penn State, especially if Penn State's blitzing, because then you just have fewer resources on the back end to stop stuff, and you have to play more man coverage, or you're giving up bigger zone opportunities. And this kid seems to just like kind of like Grunkmeyer, who's coming in, he's more decisive. And he's just kind of throwing the ball. And I think that gives them a spark. I would expect him to be the starting quarterback. I don't think we'll see Aiden Childs too much. I think if they want to get a running option out there, that might be part of it. But this backup quarterback is mobile enough to scramble. And I think that's enough of what they're going to be looking for.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that we saw him in the position last week to make some. I think I heard you rant about it on the postgame show, and I couldn't agree more. I almost wrecked my car, kind of cheering along with you. But I can't stand that they deduct rushing yards from quarterbacks for sacks. It drives me nuts. Like if you look, I think the Michigan State quarterback had like negative 41 rushing yards last week. It's because he was sacked 7 or 8 times, whatever it was. So, and it drives me nuts that is how the NCAA keeps that stat. But yeah, he is capable of running. I don't know if he runs the same as Chillis does in terms of speed and decision making and things like that. No. But enough to be effective. Like once you watch Mark Gronkowski run 66 yards up the middle against the Penn State defense, like anyone is possibly a dual threat running quarterback against you. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is.
So I will say, like, I think Michigan State, their critical weakness here is that their offensive line is bad. Like they're not good. They give up penetration in the run game. They give up pressures. They put the quarterbacks in the offense in general into bad situations. So I don't know that they're going to be I don't think there's going to be a lot of good running lanes for even the running quarterbacks because Penn State struggled to get penetration and to get guys to defeat or at least hold up against double teams. I haven't seen anybody on this offensive line for Michigan State that's going to challenge Penn State's frustratingly inconsistent run defense, and they've been better the last couple of weeks against way better teams.
Correct.
That's where I think like they can make this game one-sided, believe it or not, is in the run game, where they could probably put a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks by stopping the run because they've improved against that in the last month or so.
Yeah, they most certainly have. Right, yeah. Chris says in the chat, MSU had 2 missed field goals. I think he means against Minnesota. Empty drives. Kicker doesn't have the strongest leg. Yeah, the kicker is not, I mean, he's okay. He's like a, average college kicker, maybe a touch below that. But I think average is probably where he would fall statistically. The punter is number 1 in the country in yardage per punt. So he is someone that can flip the field. It's never a stat you really want. I don't think it's a stat you want to lead in or prefer, You'd have to
especially net or gross yards. You don't want to be punting all the time to be gross yards leader either.
Right, exactly. So, but Michigan State is partially 3-6 for that very reason. So, so the punter is good. He can flip field position. There's no doubt about that. So we'll see. Again, I think, you listen to Jonathan Smith, the Michigan State coach, talk, and you listen to Terry Smith, the interim Penn State head coach, talk. And, I mean, these are two teams that are just sick of losing. And which one hates it more and executes better to get out of the quote-unquote storm that Terry Smith continues to refer to it as, that will be a big part of this game. So, 3:30 CBS, we will see who ends their 6-game losing streak and gets their first Big Ten win, Penn State or Michigan State. At the very least, Michigan State already has a Power 4 win. They beat Boston College in overtime. Penn State, of course, still seeking that on November 12th, which is hard to believe, T. Frank, but it's true.
Yeah. I want to see Ethan Grunkmeyer, and I want to see this offense and this iteration in this season. Like I said yesterday, Penn State has had 2 seasons. The one with James Franklin and Drew Aller, and then this one without them. And I've seen notes and kind of like hints of progress, hints of development in terms of fixing their problems, which were stopping the run and then having a passing attack. They've done that while going up against teams that don't have critical weaknesses. I will say, like, Iowa is a good team, and they were better. They're the good Iowa they've always been, where they just don't have a passing attack for the most part, and they didn't against Penn State. But they found a way to win. Penn State has gone up against teams that don't have flaws since then. Now you're going up against a team that has a critical flaw. So what does the run defense look like when you're not playing some of the best teams in the country? What does the passing attack look like when you're going up against a team that isn't, suffocating and you're not afraid of them? I think there was a certain amount, and I'm going to use the word fear here, and I don't think that's a good thing when it affects your play calling. You can call it managing your quarterback, whatever it is. You're afraid to let your quarterback drop back and read the field. You shouldn't be in this game. So what does this team look like on even footing, or you might even say when they have an advantage in terms of overall talent? We haven't seen that since the Northwestern and UCLA games. And we know that like the problems were systemic before then in the way that the offense and defense were structured. Those things are better now, or at least improved. I'm not going to say fixed, but they are better than where they were. I think this is going to be like an actual barometer of where this team lands is this game. And you're right. If they come out and they dominate this game, I think it's an indicator they can win the rest of the games going forward. If they come out and they just squeak by because they just continue to be the problem team that they were before, then, I think that there's a chance that they don't win that, especially against Rutgers, who I think can be competitive, in that sense.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I just have a hard time seeing Penn State losing this game. I do. But, it's college football. Stuff happens that we don't expect all the time. Like the Penn State-Indiana game, if you had that 27-24 in the final minutes of the game, good for you. I certainly did not. I don't think you did either, T. Frank, so we shall see. But, yeah, Michigan State has some issues, and Penn State has some issues. But I think all told, Penn State has the talent advantage. And, that will lead to victory on Saturday in East Lansing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's you got to hope, right? Or else this is truly one of the worst seasons in Penn State history.
Yes, and unfortunately for Penn State, it is trending that way either way. But, all right, let's get into our final segment of the Wednesday, November 12th edition of BWI Live. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. We're going to take a look at Penn State players' NFL draft stock. Certainly I would say that Vega Ioane is the only guaranteed riser in terms of the draft stock conversation so far this year, T. Frank. And so it's been a good year for him. He was just recently listed as a draft riser by Dane Brugler of the of the Athletic. And others have shouted him out this year too. So let's start the bidding there in terms of him and the play he has had this year for a Penn State offensive line that, as you noted earlier in the show, has been fairly inconsistent.
I mean, he's been dominating in certain games. It's not been perfect. I wouldn't say he's like, oh man, he's skyrocketing up draft boards, but he's he's finally put together a season that I think fulfills the promise of when he got here as like a 350-pound offensive lineman. He's truly like there. I remember the UCLA game. He came out really mad and pancaked like 3 guys in a row. The problem is it doesn't lead to the plays you want because the players around him aren't necessarily living up to like the same billing, but his pass protection has always been really, really good. He's had a couple of like mental bust sacks or a couple of things where it's just consistency, but his pass protection for a guy his size is exceptional. And then when you look at the work he's done as a run blocker, his overall profile, PFF had him as a top 10 pick, and that made me laugh because like he was ahead of some freak athletes like Caden Proctor and Francis Mauigoa from Miami. Those guys are going to be like high first-round draft picks from a talent perspective. He's a very athletic guard, but he is not a top 10 athletic guard in college football. I could be wrong. Like he could like he slimmed down to 330, something like this. And this is like all based on the film, right? Then there's going to be the testing phase of everything. But the film is absolutely indicative of what we thought he could be as a freshman. And I'm happy for the guy that he put in the work and actually saw the rewards of that this year. So absolutely buried in the frustration of the offensive line has been Venga Ioane having a really good season.
Yeah, I think coming into the year, I'm not sure if you would have labeled him as the most likely first guy to go for this Penn State 2025 team. I think at this point, there is no question that he will be that guy because obviously we don't know a lot at this moment in time about when Drew Aller will be able to get back into the flow of things, T. Frank, with his injury situation. Dennis Sutton has not necessarily, and I guess we can go to him next. Drew Aller's draft stock obviously dropped. We don't know how much more we need to dive into that at this point. It's hard to say where he'll go. Certainly not where he expected to at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. I don't think it's tanked, though. I don't think it's tanked. Like, there is this... If you're watching Aller this year, you're going to look at the film, at least the way I looked at it, and go, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. Where are the open receivers that he's missing? Where are the plays that he's supposed to be making? Now, did he miss some throws from an accuracy perspective, or did he miss some reads? Yeah, but every quarterback does that. There were just not a whole lot of, like, great opportunities for him. And then it'll come down to, like, your prior beliefs about Aller. And then the deep ball. I think the conversation about his deep ball, it didn't improve. There was that frustration in the non-conference season. You're going to see some of those tentative things about his game, and there were not any like really standout moments from this year that I can pull off the top of my head where it's like, okay, there's the guy from 2023 and the flashes from 2022 that we saw. But at the same time, you're going to look at this offense and go, this is very frustrating, and I give him credit for gutting this out and then making plays with his feet to get the team in position to succeed. So, like, you're going to kind of give this a mulligan, including the injury, where you might say, okay, he was a first-round draft pick last year. He's not a first-round draft pick after this. But at the same time, like, what is the upside here? I think, like, third round is reasonable to say, like, a starting place, and then we'll see what happens after that in terms of where his stock went from. So, absolutely went from, like, first round to potential top 10, now it's third. So that's a massive plummet. But at the same time, like as a quarterback, I don't think he's a sixth round pick. I think somebody's going to take a gamble on him in the mid rounds because his talent is so incredible, and he is going to impress coaches when he gets on the whiteboard, and he is going to show you that he has the mental capacity for it. To mention Denai, I do think that there's a commiserate drop from the perception of where he was in the postseason last year to kind of maybe the more realistic sense of where he is now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And I think that he's one of those guys, and Zane Durant too, to some extent. Like, I feel like once they're surrounded with NFL level talent, once they're surrounded in a position or put in a position where maybe they don't have to be the star, the game wrecker, but still very good, productive player, both I think can find opportunities to thrive in the pros. I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know, but certainly we saw those guys and what they were able to do last year when they had a first-round pick in Abdul Carter and some really experienced defensive tackles in the mix around them. And then we've seen this year where it's been harder, I think, for those guys to impact games, T. Frank.
Yeah, so Zane Durant, his stock hasn't improved and it hasn't fallen. Like, the perception is... This is the problem, is like, what is our perception, and then what's actually real based on their performance, their body type, their physical abilities. And so Zane Durant, I think, has been put in a tough situation and has responded and played pretty good football, but his fit in the defense hasn't produced the numbers and the perception of this is a guy that we need to prioritize in an attacking style NFL defense. It's really just shown, like, here are the flaws and here's the ceiling. But he came back as a senior for a reason because he had that flaw and he had that ceiling. So it's just kind of confirming what you thought before instead of elevating his performance. And Denai Sutton on the same side, his perception, I think, from fans and the impact of the plays he was making in the playoff was like, okay, this is a guy that, when he's the dude, he's going to get the sack numbers. He's going to be the next first-round draft pick from Penn State. But I mean, he hasn't changed. He's the same guy. Like, I think he's the same dude he was last year. It's just, again, you don't have those one-on-one opportunities, and you don't have a defense that's so attacking and so aggressive that everyone eats when it comes to pressures and sacks upfield. So, like, those guys, their stock is the same in my mind. I've always thought they were in those rounds. They were where they are. And I think the most interesting thing for me is, like, where do they play in the NFL? Is Zane Durant, is he a defensive tackle, or does a team that runs an odd front want to see him as a defensive end? He doesn't have the length for it, but he's got the athleticism for it. And then same thing with Denai Sutton. I think they might end up at the same position, just from the way they play and their overlapping skills, where you might just find a good fit in the NFL and they might be productive, but not at the positions they are in college.
All right, let's get back to some guys whose stock was moving up, or is moving up, rather, as Vanga Iwani's has. Two of them, T. Frank, pretty easy to pick. I'm guaranteeing everyone listening or watching this or knowing where we're going next. Zachy Wheatley, 1, and Katron Allen, 2. Both guys with stock up seasons so far in our mind.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, I guess there's no real reason to say one more than the other, but in terms of what you've seen from those guys so far, just what's impressed you about them and their play so far?
The consistency and the intelligence. That's the thing that I think teams are going to love about these guys is you see real progress from Katron Allen as a decision maker, as a runner, and you see the elusiveness and the hard hitting nature of the way he runs, kind of the all-around game. And then from Zachy Wheatley, you see him as a two-way defender that can play coverage and has the instincts and the ball productivity is there. Plus, he's gotten better against the run. I still don't think he's an elite run stuffer. I don't think he's a box safety. But I do think in the world of split field safeties in the NFL, where you want a guy that can do a little bit of everything, he's going to be a good free safety at the next level that a team is going to trust to do a bunch of different things pretty well. And so for them, it's just all going to be about the combine. How fast are they? What are their testing numbers? What's their size overall? Because Wheatley, 6'2", depending on what size he wants to show up at the combine, some teams might see him as a box safety from, kind of the limitations in his game and also his size. So it's the respect factor I have for those two, that they have played really good football. They've made very few mistakes. And then in Katron's situation, when he got the opportunity, he's been prolific. Wheatley just hasn't had as many opportunities because of the way the defense is played, where he's not been able to be. They haven't had a lot of third downs where it's like, oh, Zachy Wheatley can just read the eyes of the quarterback and pick the ball off. It's been like 3rd and 5, and you got to be looking out for 6 different things because you don't have an obvious passing situation.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you on that. And I think that when you look at those two guys, the year that they've had, they certainly will have a chance to increase their, their stock down the stretch. And then obviously the NFL Combines have placed both of those guys. A guy like Nick Singleton, perhaps Devontae Ross can test better than maybe their film had shown up. Brad in the chat, off topic, but says, hey, T. Frank, are you going to have or have you done a coaching search show? So, yeah, those are mixed in on the various shows we have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The problem, Brad, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, is that James Franklin was fired 1 month ago today. And what we probably could have told you about the comings and goings of that list and where things stand have not really changed all that much in the last month. Have some guys maybe creeped up? Yes. Have some guys maybe creeped down? Sure. And you can go read that in Sean Fitz's latest hot board at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But in terms of building a whole show around a coaching search, it makes a lot more sense in theory than it does in practice, I guess is how I'd put it, T. Frank.
Yeah, and so there's two things that kind of are our reality here is that we've got a lot of great stuff for you, and it's at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and I don't want to pump the guys for too much information and then, kind of betray our subscribers and the people who support us over there. And so then it becomes like, what do I know? What is my view of these things? What are the things I can bring to you from that perspective? And it's a big lift when I'm trying to get each week to know the team that Penn State's about to play. So this is an excuse. I should just be working overtime and looking at like the film of the top candidates and kind of researching them and bringing you all those information, factoids. But if you're talking about like the horse race of who is going to be the next head coach, I don't have an opinion on it because I'm still, I'm still focused on what's going on with the team. Like I have a responsibility to know what's going on Saturday to bring people the analysis there. And so it doesn't really fit into the flow of our stuff, but it's absolutely right. We should be talking more about the coaching search. I should be doing more of those things. And that's just where I haven't been able to get the extra hours in the day to go and do that research to bring you non-clickbait nonsense. Because that's what Greg is saying is like we could do that show and it'd be clickbait nonsense. And that is kind of a tenet here on the BWI Live show is that from the thumbnails to the content, we try to be like journalistically responsible and we try to be good at our jobs. And so if we're going to do something like that, it takes time. And just, like when you got 6 plates spinning in the air and you add a 7th, yeah, I could absolutely do it. And I just haven't yet. And you're right, Brad. It's something I'm going to be doing here in the final 3 weeks because I know that you guys want it. It's just like, oh, here we go. Like I gotta get the bar. I gotta get the weight. I gotta get used to the bar, and then we can start lifting some weights here of the coaching search because it is absolutely something that is relevant and that people want to know about, and so we're going to be doing that for sure.
Yeah, more of that to come both here on the BWI YouTube channel and at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. T. Frank, an hour is up, my friend. Any final thoughts on where Penn State is this week moving forward? Or just in general, as we get ready to wrap up this edition of BWI Live?
I think the biggest thing for the final month of the season, and I said this a couple times, but I'll just phrase it this way. There's an opportunity to be entertaining and to have entertaining football on the field because you don't need to play with a tight butthole over the next 3 weeks. Just the same thing Terry Smith said when they opened up against Iowa. Empty the clip. Be like fun. And I know we're talking mostly about the offense, but the defense too. Like they've started blitzing. They've been more aggressive. They're not trying to be as meticulous in the details of control. It's like just go play football and let's have some fun. Let's watch some fun football. Let's play some fun football. And if you win or you lose, like Indiana, the thing I took away from that game is it was awesome. And I know that these are bad teams and you don't have the same stakes of playing and upsetting the number 2 team in the country, but you still have the opportunity to go out and be fun. And I hope that that's what we see over the next 3 weeks is some genuinely fun football that makes people glad they tuned in. Win or lose. You can lose and it can be frustrating and annoying. We've seen that for like 3 to 5 years under Penn State football and the offensive specifically. So hopefully over the next 3 weeks, there's some really entertaining football. Win or lose. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, T. Frank. There's nothing worse than getting to this point of the year and having very little for fans to root for or for the team to play for, but they are still playing for bowl eligibility, and I don't know how much that matters. I don't know how many guys would still want to stick around for a bowl game if Penn State would get there, but look, no matter how it plays out, we'll be here telling you about Penn State football, coaching search, and other Penn State sports as well. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. BWI Live for November 12 is in the books. Stay tuned. A lot of practice coverage and Terry Smith content coming tonight, both here on the YouTube channel and at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. The guys are back tomorrow with the recruiting show. And T. Frank, 1:30 for the tailgate show on Saturday. Is that right?
It's a 3:30 game?
Yes.
So 12:30.
12:30. All right, 12:30 for the pregame show on Saturday. So that's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. We'll catch you next time on BWI Live here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel.